I'm Nancy Hood with East Bay Citizens for Peace. And every day as I read the news, I am just more and more heartbroken. I am close to tears right now, and that is how I have been. I don't think I can carry more grief in my heart when I see all the death and destruction and suffering that's going on in Gaza. And I am not going to leave out the Israelis who have died in this struggle, but there is just no way that you can excuse what the Israeli government is doing to the people of Palestine. No number of dead children is going to resolve this problem. We need a path to just peace. We need ceasefire immediately. We need humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. The only winners in this horrific situation is death and the war industry. And my country, sad to say, is complicit in these war crimes. I am here because I feel so strongly. And I want to say to Senator Jack Reed, if you have a heart that is still beating, if you have a conscience at all, I want you to stop this killing. I want you to speak out loud and clear for a ceasefire and no more U.S. armaments to go to Israel and humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. Please, for the sake of all human beings, you must act. Thank you. Thank you. We're here. Who would like to speak next?
I will. This is part of a longer piece that I wrote. My name is Barry Brown, and I'm also with East Bay Citizens for Peace, and I echo what Nancy said. We cannot hear the screams of the people of Gaza, nor were we able to hear the screams of the Israelis, but they're in my ears without a moment's rest. So this is part of this piece. The horrendous attack by Hamas on Israeli civilians cannot be rationalized, just as the indiscriminate bombing of civilians in Gaza cannot be justified. The 4-year-old who is bleeding to death on either side doesn't care about who is right or who is wrong. The Bible says an eye for an eye, but perhaps that reasoning leaves everyone blind. The Buddha said that whoever picks up a hot coal to throw at someone else burns themselves. I no longer care about who is right or who is wrong, about past grievances and historical blunders. I am on the side of the children because I am convinced of their innocence. There's only one answer that makes any sense to me today, and that is an immediate ceasefire. The poet Alto wrote, "Let's stop fighting, you go first."
Whatever works. Is he standing here so back?
Yeah, whatever you want to do.
You want to be there?
I'll work wherever.
So we've got the sign so that we all have been seeing the devastation and we're all affected by it. Up over 4,300 Palestinian children dead. And they're really saying in the reports that there's probably around 1,200 in the rubble. So the real number is probably 5,500. And they're estimating that it's 180 children per day who are dying. So yeah, we really do want, the focus for Rhode Island is Reed and Whitehouse really need to be stepping up their effort to bring an end. I do have a poem by Hanan Mikhail Ashrari that I would like to read. She's a 77-year-old Palestinian professor. She's been very involved in the political process. She was spokesperson, I believe, for the Palestinian Authority back in the early 90s when, I guess maybe when we came closest to actually coming to some resolution. Tomorrow the bandages will come off. I wonder, will I see half an orange, half an apple, half my mother's face with my one remaining eye? I did not see the bullet, but felt its pain exploding in my head. His image did not vanish. The soldier with a big gun, unsteady hands, and a look in his eyes I could not understand. If I can see him so clearly with my eyes closed, it could be that inside our heads, we each have one spare set of eyes to make up for the ones we lose. Next month, on my birthday, I'll have a brand new glass eye. Maybe things will look round and fat in the middle. I've gazed through all my marbles. They made the world look strange. I hear a 9-month-old has also lost an eye. I wonder if my soldier shot her too. A soldier looking for little girls who look him in the eye. I'm old enough, almost 4. I've seen enough of life, but she's just a baby who didn't know any better. That was 1988.
I have a song I'd like to sing. It's a song that I learned from when I was a college student, and we picked up a hitchhiker on the way from Ohio, where I went to college, to Boston area, and he had just come from a kibbutz, and he taught us a song, and it's how everyone neath their vine and fig tree shall live in peace and unafraid, and into plowshares turn their swords, nations shall learn war no more. And I sing it in Hebrew and in English. Lo yizagoy el goy cherev, lo yimadu od milchama. Lo yizagoy el goy cherev, lo yimadu od milchama. Lo yizagoy el goy cherev, lo yimadu od milchama. Lo yizagoy el goy cherev, lo yimadu od milchama. And everyone neath their vine and fig tree shall live in peace and unafraid. And everyone neath their vine and fig tree shall live in peace and unafraid. And into plowshares turn their swords, nations shall learn war no more. And into plowshares turn their swords, nations shall learn war no more. Who else would like to say something?
I would. Let me first say that the one good thing about this is the silver lining in every birth. The one good thing about this, the Palestinians and their suffering and dying have united the world. There are protests, mass protests. There were 1 million people in London yesterday. There were 300,000 in Washington, D.C. the other day. There are protests in Germany and all over the world. People are coming together and they're finally figuring out that lies generate wars and that wars are based on lies. In this country, the politicians, like the Western countries in Europe, are so out of step with the will of the people. 85% of Democrats want a ceasefire. You can't get 85% of the people to agree on anything, but they want an end to the baby killing. They want a ceasefire. 64% of Republicans want a ceasefire. Our politicians haven't said a word. I called Jack Reed last week, his office, and I also called Senator Whitehouse. And before I did a little homework. I looked up what they've said, what each person has said about this. Not a word. Not a word. I got on their webpage to see how they list this as an issue. It's not listed. It's not listed. So I called them and said,
Shame.
You know what?
It's a shame.
Yeah, absolutely. I called both offices and said, this was last week, 12,000 people have died, have been killed, 4,000 kids, and you have nothing to say? Not a word. You spend millions of dollars, talking to his office, you spend millions of dollars trying to get in a position of leadership, and you're like a deer in the headlight. You have nothing to say about 4,000 little kids being slaughtered, and nothing to say about the 12,000 civilians, most of whom are women and children. Not a word. And so I finally said to Reed's office, go ahead, I'll give you the phone now. Justify the slaughter of 12,000 civilians. I'm waiting. And of course they couldn't do that. There was absolute silence. They're just out of touch. Especially Reed, with 85% of his party saying, end this, stop this. And Whitehouse is no difference. I called his office and basically went through the same spiel. They don't care what I have to say. They don't care what you have to say. We're nothing, because my phone call didn't have a check with it. So that's all they listen to. I don't want a humanitarian pause. That's like saying, we'll give you 4 hours, you can have a drink of water, and then we're going to start the killing. We want a ceasefire. We don't want a humanitarian pause. I don't want to give them 4 hours more of life and then watch them be slaughtered again. This is ridiculous. I'm so glad that the American people have seen through this whole charade. We're on the right side of history. Our politicians are on the wrong side of history.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Yes.
Nancy, you wanted to speak?
Sure, yeah. I'm Nancy Houston with the Rhode Island FCNL Friends Committee on National Legislation, Quaker group, Rhode Island advocacy team, and I have a statement here. I'm only going to read part of it. It's from the Quaker United Nations office. Stop the violence and allow humanitarian access to Gaza. This is the strong call from Quakers around the world in a statement issued this week. The Quaker United Nations office was among signatories to this statement, along with Quaker organizations that work on the ground in Palestine and Israel. The Israeli government must grant access and safety to the United Nations and humanitarian agencies to fulfill their duties. Instead of further bloodshed, we need immediate humanitarian access for Gaza and adherence to international humanitarian and human rights law, reads the statement. We demand that national leaders, faith leaders, and journalists use their powers to influence to bring a bold voice for humanitarian protection and an end to the ongoing war crimes. Wherever there have been war crimes and violations of international humanitarian law, there must be accountability. Violence such as this is never justifiable, and we insist that a ceasefire must be realized along with the return of all hostages. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Sorry, I'm just calling upstairs. Did someone else want to speak? Would you?
Can I say something?
Please do.
I have not been able to get myself out on the street under the heading of the message, ceasefire now. That might sound shocking to you, but let me explain why I'm saying that. I'm saying that because it's related to what you said, Joe, because that is totally, completely inadequate. Why? Because it's mowing the grass in 2014, mowing the grass this year, and then we can stop with the ceasefire before we start mowing the grass once again. No, no, no. End this completely, once and for all. And why am I here today? Because I can find myself in no more tax dollars for war crimes. That is something that I support and that I'm sure we all support. Look at these numbers here. We've spent $11 trillion on war. And what happens in this country as we spend this money and as we spend money on war crimes in other countries? Every damned day, every day of the year in the United States, 800 people die of poverty. Since the war started in Gaza, this latest flare-up, the war never ended, since that latest flare-up, almost 30,000 people in the US died of poverty. Where are their pictures? Why aren't we protesting that every day? Why do we keep spending money on something that we should not be spending it on? And why do we not? Well, let me just end with if I can remember, what did Martin Luther King say more than 50 years ago? A nation that year in, year out spends more on national defense than on programs of social uplift approaches spiritual death. This is spiritual death. We're there. This is what it looks like. End it. And I must say, thinking of Senator Reed, in 2014, the previous occasion when we did this, I went to a meeting of the Democratic Town Committee in South Kingstown. And it so happened that good old Jack was there, and I got up and I confronted him about what was happening exactly at that point, August of 2014. I also confronted him about his position on fracked gas. You know what happened? It took about 30 seconds and they shut me up. Are you surprised? I will say one thing in favor of Senator Reed. He was the only one who said, let him speak. I will not forget that. But the crimes that he has supported vastly outweigh all of that. So end it once and for all. We can do it.
Ceasefire now.
I just read this morning along your line. The interest on the national debt now is $1 trillion a year. Just to pay the interest, $1 trillion a year. That's not sustainable. We're all going down.
So we have a group of 15 of us.
Okay, thank you.
Our call in conjunction with the American Conservative Committee and many organizations around the country as well. We all know the children are dying there, and they desperately need humanitarian aid. Their hospitals are non-functioning, and we need to start supporting Israel and stop sending weapons here. That's what we're here for. Thank you so much for coming down. Does anybody else want to give a message to them?
Anybody else want to give a packet?
I guess maybe we can just send the link from the coverage. We probably had 7 or 8 people make statements.
Yeah.
If you could give attention to that.
And you might want to do one other thing. When you're speaking to Senator Reed, there are a dozen of us here. You might want to just ask the question, how many people would need to be at Kennedy Plaza for him to think about the dying children in Gaza and address that issue? Address it, one way or the other. You might want to ask him how many children, how many people would need to be here and how many children would need to die for him to address that issue.
So we were told we couldn't lean anything against the building, so we just leaned them against the orange.
Oh, yeah, we do.
Word like Yes, you can gather those information.
Okay. So, do you want us to, are you be demonstrating out here for, are you demonstrating out here for a period of time?
We are now going to Senator Whitehouse. There will be some people who've been doing it.
Sure.
up here. So, I mean, I don't know if anybody wants. Does anybody want any of these? These are going to go up to Jack Reed's office. Are you okay with that, Larry? Go to Jack Reed's office. No, I didn't. Did you get pictures at the memorial?
I did.
I would need 2 hands.
Okay, here we go.
They already grabbed it.
He took pictures.
Oh, okay.
Steve did. We're counting on you for all the
I'll
pictures.
get you everything I can.
Thank you.
Everything.
I said I wanted to have a turn. Of course, that was the right thing to do. Then can I continue after taking
Yeah, okay, so we have to. Sorry, everyone.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you. You can.
Can you take one of these too? Say hi to Senator Reed
You
for me,
can
please.
take the
I'm
bears
Peter
and the
Nightingale.
flowers and everything up with you. Sorry. Excuse me. I should pick up here. Which one? All right, so we need to wrap up here and to move on to Senator Whitehouse, but Randolph wanted to say something before we move on from here. Okay. So Randolph?
Thank you, everybody. What I've heard from people over and over again is that the scale of the suffering, the intentionally caused suffering and violence is just too big for many of us to fathom. And you know, the whole world is watching this, and unfortunately, the only way many people can process it is by just saying, well, the other side's committed this violence, it's their fault, and that's the only way they can process it. But it's just gone on for a long, long time, and it's and you know, it just keeps getting worse. People don't just retaliate; they retaliate worse each time. And one of the big parts of that is the reason one reason why we're here is because our politicians are part of that, are part of presenting that false picture where it's just one side that's been doing most of the attacks and the atrocities. A few days after this phase of the conflict broke out in October, the Biden administration was on the phone with a bunch of senators, including Senator Reed, whose office is up there, and these Biden administration White House staff were telling the senators, these Democratic senators, prepare public opinion for a long war. That was the message. Oh yeah, that really happened. Yep. And unfortunately, they've been following that rather than following the humane priorities of ordinary Americans. So, I mean, we're here not just to send a message to our senators, but also to the Biden administration that they bear a lot of responsibility for the violence. Hardly anybody even wants Biden to be reelected, or to run again. But Biden deliberately went against public opinion and stood more aggressively with Israel. And you know, Gaza is being bombed to hell. 70% of Gaza's populations were refugees to begin with, and they've been locked in this very small territory because, and it's an open secret, but the reason why Israel doesn't allow people from Gaza to leave, even to go somewhere else, is because the Israelis know they've caused so much trauma that the Israelis don't even feel safe to letting Gazans anywhere outside this prison. It's their manifestation of a guilty conscience. And you know, a few weeks ago they were talking about making a new prison for Gazans in Egypt, just as long as it's not close to Israel. You know, it's just wrong to have people confined like this. We hear this lie that the whole conflict will be over once we eliminate Hamas or once we eliminate colonialism. It's not that simple. There's been a lot of wrongdoing on both sides. And unfortunately, our senators and our president are sending that false message. So I'm glad we had this. I'm glad there have been so many people around Rhode Island protesting. Lots of different groups. East Bay Citizens for Peace has been doing protests repeatedly. Rhode Island Anti-War Committee has stepped up their protests, done 2 a week at the State House, Tuesday and Friday, 4 to 5 p.m. And a bunch of us have also been here every day. So there's a lot of things going on, and there will be more, but it's good that people are speaking up. I'd like to sing one final performance, just briefly. When refugees are kept from their land, let the people go. Oppressed so hard they cannot stand, let the people go. Go down to Gaza, locked down in Israel's hand. Tell old Pharaoh, let my people go.
You have your own club sector. It's so huge. Oh, I was
I have a poem by Adrian Rich.
That would be wonderful. So I'll call to upstairs, shall I? Or do you want me to wait and you do your poem? Do the poem.
The poem is My Heart is Moved by Adrian Rich. My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I have to cast my lot with those who age after age, perversely, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world. Thank you.
Anyone else?
We could sing a song that everybody knows.
Should we read these notes that Barry has, or?
Yeah, I was handing out notes before. These little pieces of paper.
One of them is from Jeanette Rankin. I don't know if any of you know who. She was the very first woman to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives.
So we could read those?
Yeah, she said you can no more win a war than you can win an earthquake.
Okay, well, why don't we do that, and then we'll be thinking of a song. And meanwhile, I think I will call. They could see some of the ceremony.
Yeah, that's good.
People want to read them. I had a great one from.
I got one from Barry. It's Henry David Thoreau. If 1,000 people were not to pay their tax bill this year, that would not be a violent and bloody measure, as it would be able to pay them and enable the state to commit violence and shed innocent blood.
It was just before the Civil War.
Here's another one of yours. Do you know what astonishes me most in the world? The inability of force to create anything. In the long run, the sword has always been beaten by the spirit. And this was said by Napoleon Bonaparte near the end of his life.
I have something to share. This is from a 5th grader at Ramallah Friends School, a Quaker school on the West Bank. And this 5th grader said, "Our weapon is education, and the secret to ending violence is nonviolence. My prayer is that the war ends by nonviolence. Everyone lives in peace, and no one is under occupation anymore." That was found at the end of a letter by the headmistress to the Ramallah Friends School community. Thank you.
Some of you might be interested to know that I was in Israel and Palestine in 2009, that I actually visited one of the kibbutz near the border. I don't know whether it's the one that suffered the most deaths, but I visited there. I waited in the Eretz waiting space there. You know, the group I was traveling with tried to get us into Gaza and couldn't, but there was an elderly woman sitting in there waiting for someone to decide whether she could get into Gaza or not. I was in Sderot, in the house of a woman who was part of a friendship movement across the border between Sderot and Gaza City. The basement of the house next door had been hit by one of those homemade rockets. It wasn't a big damage, but there it was in front of my own eyes. And then at a different point, we were in a kibbutz, a woman's kibbutz, that was a peace kibbutz just north of Tel Aviv. So it all seems very real to me. It all seems incredibly painful. Shall I read my sticker? There is no flag big enough to hide the shame of killing innocent people. It makes me think of one more thing I could say. You know, by the criterion that Netanyahu is using, we're all guilty because we voted for the presidents who go to war. He's saying that every Palestinian is guilty because they didn't vote Hamas out. How could we have voted out the warmongers in this country? We can't, because all sides are warmongers. So by that criterion, no one will notice that we were out here protesting. They'll say the United States is a warmongering country, and there were its citizens bombing.
Can I add something to what Pat just said?
Yes.
I was in Israel at the end of the 1967 war, weeks after it. I saw the flags they had planted in the rubble. What does it mean you plant a flag on the West Bank? You know what it means. It's ours. I worked that summer in a collective farm and I volunteered and I helped to harvest, picking olives and picking cucumbers in the heat. And then at some point we made an excursion by bus to the West Bank that had just been conquered. And I was told about the previous incarnation of this village that had been at a place called the Gush Etzion. Gush means block, the Etzion block. There was a whole combination of kibbutzim and places that existed and that had been destroyed. And there had been a massacre. One of those kibbutzim, the population had been killed by the Arabs. I was not told that a similar massacre had happened by the people who were hurt by this, or no, actually the other way around. So the people who did this on the Jewish settlement, am I getting this right? So there was this massacre that was perpetuated on the Jews, and then that there was a revenge. I wasn't told that. I was only told one side of the story, and it took me years and years and years until I finally realized that what was happening is exactly what we see right now. They are back there. The settlers have taken this place, and they turned this whole West Bank into a collection of Bantustans, as it's called. That's the only word that really describes what's going on. And it goes on and on and on.
Newham, who else am I missing? Other groups here. Very much. Yes. I think pretty much all of them. So we have put together a memorial to Senator Whitehouse's office with a message. I hope the children are still reading and some of the projects that he needs to speak. He needs to when we're done, we won't be here a whole lot longer. And I'm sorry to Nick, thank you.
Hi Nick, I'm Barry Brown. I've always been a huge supporter of Senator Whitehouse, particularly what he's doing regarding the Supreme Court. I don't want this issue to come back and bite him. I know that he's a compassionate man. I don't want to have thousands upon thousands of children's blood on his hands. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see it besmirch his reputation as a fine Rhode Island senator. I just hope you'll pass that along to him. It takes a unique kind of courage to stand up to your administration. I know that, and I believe that Senator Whitehouse has that courage. I hope he'll muster it up for us.
And if he has to break with Senator Reed,
I have to. In the long run, I think it would benefit not only him and the state of Rhode Island, but the whole country and the world.
does anybody else wish to say something?
The question that was, we just came from Jack Reed's office, and the question
Can you see him?
that was, the question that was asked was like, how many people here does Whitehouse need to see to look at it differently, and or like how many Palestinian children does he need to see dead to look at it differently? And I just want to say for the record too, not to counteract the previous speaker, but Whitehouse has been for these military budgets. 6 or 7 years ago, our military budget was $620 billion, and now it's almost $900 billion, and that doesn't even include all true military accounts. So he really, I don't disagree. Whitehouse is good on some issues, but he's been terrible on the military budget, and he's putting this pressure that's creating these inflation of war and conflict around the world. The other countries are responding to what we're doing.
For me, I was in the middle of saying something, and I would like to finish it, and I would want to
introduce yourself.
I'm Peter Nightingale. I'm one of the senator's constituents. I suggested you ask him whether he knows what he's doing, and whether he knows who he's supporting, and what he is allowing to happen there. There is a long history that started at the end of the 1800s by a guy called Jabotinsky, who was in favor of Greater Israel. You know what Greater Israel was in that view? It started at the Nile and it went all the way to the Euphrates. It's not from the sea to the river, but it's from one river to another river. There is a direct line going from this guy, Jabotinsky, Zeev Jabotinsky, to Menachem Begin, to this crook who we have right now in Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. He is not stopping that. He is sending weapons to people to basically create one form or another, not necessarily the extreme form that I mentioned, of Greater Israel. That is what is happening. And I would like to know, does he realize that? Does he know the history? Does he know which side he's on?
And Peter, would you like to say how you know this? Or I know how you know this.
Yes, I know this because, well, it's a long story. Let me tell you the short version. My mother escaped from Vienna as a 15-year-old girl when the Nazis invaded. She escaped to a country where she was allowed in, Palestine at the time. It saved her life. And she told me about the names of these people and what they were about. And maybe she didn't give me all the details, but that's where I learned this. Over the course of my whole life, I have heard these stories about Kristallnacht, how people knocked on the door, the Nazis, and somebody saved them by saying they're not home. So this is something where I started on the side of the people who were escaping to a country that saved their lives. And now I see that the shoe is on the other foot, and it really hurts me.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Peter. Thank you.
I just want to say two quick things. One, to emphasize what Peter just said. This is, I don't know if the senator realized it or not, but Peter is right on. This is bigger than Gaza. This is about land. Gaza just happens to be part of that land. This is about Gaza and Gaza's gas. $500 million worth of gas right off Gaza's coast. This is about acquiring more land. That's the one thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is, and I just said it over at Senator Reed's office, 85% of Democrats are demanding a ceasefire. 85% of his constituents are demanding a ceasefire. 85%. You can't get 85% to agree on the weather right now. We're out front. He's lagging way behind. He's got to get with the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
All we are saying is give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance.
All we are saying
is give peace a chance.
Even if the profits of the war industry will go down.
Amen. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like to take these things?
We're leaving them for him to take upstairs.
What'd you say? When I said I love you, I don't want to be in your
Thank you. Thank you.